introductions first. This will come in. I think Sandy's still on her way. So welcome everyone to our work session this evening. We're going to be talking about concept plans for the central core area of downtown Superior. A very exciting part of the development. So I'm very interested to hear what we've got coming for us this evening. Why don't we go around and do a quick round of introductions, just for the benefit of the public that's here. We typically do not have time for public comment during work sessions. We do ask you to stay on to our regular meeting, which starts at 7 o'clock, and we certainly have time for public comment then. And of course, you're always welcome to send emails and contact us after the fact. We're not going to be voting on anything tonight. This is strictly just a concept plan, just to start getting ideas out on the table and getting board feedback. So, with that, I'll start with introductions. Clint Folsom, Mayor. Okay.
Ken Lish, Trustee.
Loris Kujinski, Trustee.
Mark Lasis, Mayor Pro Tem.
Neil Shaw, Trustee.
I'm Bill Vitek, Dig Studio, Landscape Architect on the project.
Carrie Willis with KTGY Architects.
Rachel Keevan, also with KTGY.
Brian Morgan, with Morgan Holdings, one of the owners.
Bill Jenks, here on behalf of both RC Superior, the master developer, and Morgan Ranch DTS, the developer of the project.
Kevin Ryan, Trustee.
I'm Anthony Stewart, Planning Commissioner.
And Ryan Goddard with Dig Studio as well.
All right, Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for coming out. Glad to see so many friendly faces here. Very excited after the past 3 years of my own involvement, plus I know some time before that, to be bringing this concept plan for really the downtown core of downtown Superior. As you'll see, very exciting project with a mix of uses, including retail, restaurants, as well as some more multifamily and residential to kind of round out that town core and the true Main Street area of the project. I'm going to start by just introducing our team, giving a little more background on all the designers and everything, and then we'll let our architects take you through the specific plans and show you some renderings, site plan, and then open it up for discussion and feedback, answer any questions you have. So the project team is on the board here. As I mentioned, Ranch Capital, which is a partner in RC Superior, separately from RC Superior, has formed a joint venture with Morgan Holdings, which is called Morgan Ranch DTS, that's been updated, LLC, which will be the developer of this project. And then for the project team, we have Terry Willis and Rachel Keevan here from KTGY. KTGY is an architecture and planning firm headquartered in Irvine with a 40-person office here in Denver, quickly growing. They've completed a ton of commercial space and over 200,000 residential units while achieving over 650 design awards in its 27-year history, so a very experienced architect in this product type. Bill Vitek and Ryan Goddard are here from Dig Studio, which is a landscape architecture, placemaking, and urban design firm with offices in Denver and Phoenix. Dig focuses on thoughtful and creative solutions that help connect people and define a community's unique sense of place, so really focused on that placemaking that's so important here. There are 30 people strong across both offices, and the firm's leaders have worked on some of Denver's most notable projects, including Stapleton, Belmar, and numerous redevelopment projects around Coors Field and Denver Union Station. We have Sean Smith is here from CFC Construction, a Golden, Colorado-based general contractor that specializes in mixed-use and multifamily projects. CFC's completed more than 3,000 multifamily units in the last 5 years and currently has approximately 1,500 under construction. CFC has a deep understanding of the importance of placemaking in every residential project it does, and brings deep experience and knowledge in the marketplace and a proven record of delivering quality projects on time and on budget. So they're helping us with our pre-construction and estimating and kind of the general contractor side of things. And then we have Ellen. Is Ellen here? I think Ellen's joining us from David Hicks Lampert, their local retail brokerage. So they'll be helping us define sort of the retail uses and potential commercial uses going into the ground floor here. They have 23 years and 17 brokers in the market. They've arranged retail leasing for many of the successful retail developments, including the streets of South Glen, the Foothills Mall redevelopment, and the others shown up on the screen here. Alan's been practicing as a retail broker since 1989 and has worked on all aspects of retail development. We also have Jim Brostovich from Civil Resources, somewhere here, who's been the civil engineer for the whole project. He's designed all the backbone infrastructure that'll support this part of the town center, and will design the private infrastructure for a seamless integration of utilities and drainage. And then Ranch Capital, as you know, is a private equity firm founded in 2002 with approximately $2 billion of committed investments in a broad range of asset classes. The principals, including myself, have been involved in the ground-up design and development of over 3 million square feet of commercial space, including hotel, office, entertainment, and retail uses, as well as over 3,000 residential units. And then I'll let Ryan give a quick introduction for Morgan Holdings, our partner, and we'll get into the design after that.
Morgan Holdings was it's a multi-generational development company started in 1959 by my grandfather. Started building with his bare hands, and it's kind of gone through the generations. And we've built around 16,000 apartments coast to coast, and about 3,000 within Colorado. Most recently, 3100 Pearl in Boulder, Solana Cherry Creek in Glendale, and Colorado Point on Colorado Boulevard. And we've been long-term friends with Ranch Capital, and we're very much looking forward to this development.
So getting into the project, I'll just do a very quick kind of broad overview, and then I'll let our designers get into more detail. In general, to orient you with the project, this is the entire PD area. We're talking about just the area highlighted and outlined in black here. So it's blocks 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11, which is the 5 westernmost blocks that front Main Street. And generally, the plan really respects the PD that's been in place since 2013. It's organized around a very pedestrian-friendly, walkable Main Street with ground floor retail and commercial uses. Everything you see here in the orange color is commercial use. Everything in the light yellow is residential. So it's sort of separated into, this area is sort of subdivided into 3 subsections. The northern section is a residential flat product that overlooks the Rocky Mountains and the parks to the north. The central section is this mixed-use retail and residential corridor on Main Street that's generally 3-story buildings with 2 floors of residential over 1 floor of ground floor retail. So it's creating this really interesting urban and pedestrian scale project. As you walk down Main Street there, it's got nice scale on both sides, not too tall, but also gives it, that street, sort of street front presence that we've been looking for this whole time. And then as you get further south, we'll have some surface parking to support the uses on Main Street, and then some more traditional 3-story townhomes that bleed into the existing 3- and 4-story townhomes on blocks 13 and 25. So I think it's a great site plan total. We're talking about roughly 400 residential units. I think it says 409 total residential units, and just about 70 to 75,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space, showed in the orange. So I think with that, I'm going to let Terry jump in with KTGY and kind of take us through the site plan in more detail, and we'll get into some renderings to kind of give you some views of the project. We actually have some virtual reality stuff that you can play with near the end of the meeting that puts you inside the project and you can look around, which is going to be fun to watch. And of course, feel free to ask questions or give us comments anytime throughout. And again, really happy and excited to be here with us.
Thanks, Bill, and thank you for the opportunity for us to show our work. Again, my name is Terry Willis with KTGY Architecture and Planning. And we're really thrilled, actually, to be presenting this after knowing about this project and working on it for quite a while now. And we really consider it one of our top projects in Denver. And when designed, if successful, it'll become the kind of the walkable heart and the center of this community. So just to orient you, the project that we're talking about is really the central section of the overall plan. So it's outlined in red on this plan. So to the north is Creekview Way. To the east is Superior Drive that runs in front of the sports stable. To the south is Old Railway. And then on the west is Marshall Road. So as Bill mentioned, it's really 3 interconnected walkable neighborhoods. To the south are townhouses. In the middle is Main Street, which is residential over retail. Multifamily to the north of that, and then we're showing in the park, we're showing a restaurant pad within Coal Creek Park. So the site is bisected in a couple different directions. In the east-west direction, it's bisected by Main Street, which kind of terminates in the sports stable, and it's bisected north and south. Oh, great, full screen. By Promenade Drive, and they intersect right at Central Plaza, and the promenade from the plaza north is a pedestrian road. So we'll work from the south heading north. So starting from the south, there's about 65 to 70 townhouses, and they are by a third-party builder. Hopefully it's one of the builders that's already established on the site further south of this location. And then just to the north of that, Main Street. Main Street has about 130 residential units on 2 stories over about 74,000 square feet of retail. That 74,000 includes some 1-story, some retail. I shouldn't say necessarily all retail. Let's just call it commercial space. The residential units are elevator-served flats on the upper 2 floors. Each unit has its own balcony, or the smaller units might have Juliet balconies. The units and the retail will share parking behind these buildings, but each unit will have a dedicated residential only parking space. The parking is reasonably balanced between the residential and the commercial, but there will be a parking consultant that's engaged to refine the shared parking analysis between these functions to make sure there is sufficient parking for both residents and commercial users. And then on the corners of the buildings have been kind of notched back to really expand the sidewalk space with the thought that those are the likely locations for restaurants, and that will allow them to spill out onto the sidewalk for alfresco dining. And then around the town green, or the Central Plaza, we have 1-story commercial space on the on the upper right, the northeast, with the ability of the shops and restaurants along there to open up and spill out onto the plaza. And that 1-story function of that particular building is really important to the plan, and we think will be important to some of the users that won't feel comfortable being under residential above, to allow them access to the rooftop. So it provides flexibility within our plan to have commercial space that's 1-story in height as well. In the corner of the site, it's kind of hard to see in the site plan, but really holding the corner of the plaza, the southeast corner of the plaza, is what we're imagining is a freestanding, playful, iconic, interesting, unique, restaurant or brew club. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. Maybe a distillery. I don't know. But within the plaza, to really hold and anchor the corner of the plaza, and let's see what I can't really see here, but we're actually illustrating it with a rooftop deck. But its intention is to be a landmark, really, for downtown Superior. Maybe that's the place where people go and take their Instagram photos. On the west flank of the plaza is the residential clubhouse, and it has a leasing center and fitness center and games area that kind of spill out onto the promenade. The second floor has co-working of that building. That's the intention, as well as some outside spaces, including a terrace on the rooftop terrace on the west side, overlooking a pool that is to the west of that clubhouse, a resident pool. And then to the north of that, with the kind of the lighter color yellow, are 342 residential units in walk-up configuration. And the fronts of the units are lined up along the streets and the pedestrian promenades, and they're really organized around kind of two pedestrian spines. One the promenade, which, you know, the center of the site running north and south, and then there's a kind of an east-west spine that runs through it as well. So so they'll be organized kind of like townhomes. They aren't townhomes, they are flats, but they're kind of organized architecturally like townhomes in a very urban configuration, kind of lining the streets. So they're very unlike a conventional garden apartment development. So they're also organized to line the right of way and hide the parking to the greatest extent possible, both by tucking under the building much of the parking in private garages and providing surface parking that's kind of hidden by the buildings themselves from the public right of way. And we have a little bit of a triangular leftover area between some of the commercial parking and the residential, which is a dog park. And we've had internal discussions about whether that's a park that should be dedicated to the town or whether that is a private park for this development and addressing all the liability concerns associated with that. So all of the buildings are no more than about 40 to 50 feet high, well under the 55 to 65 foot height limit in the plan. So let's move on to the...
On the density, I just wanted to point out real quickly, this area is entitled for up to approximately 750 units. You know, we have the total not to exceed 1,400 in the entire project, right? We have a plan for roughly 600 in the south area that technically could go up to 650. That leaves entitlements under the PD for 750 to 800 units in this area. So this is providing, you know, at 400, it's roughly half of the entitled density. Hey, Alan, come on in. Good timing.
Good. How you guys doing? Thank you.
Why don't you make an introduction? We're actually on your slides, so sorry to kind of...
No problem. Hey, I'm Alan Lampert. I'm with David Hickson Lampert, retail brokerage. Been working in the market here for about 23 years. Bill brought me on a couple years ago to start taking a look at this piece of property. So I was involved with the property about 20 years ago, actually, and have watched Superior evolve into what you've become now. And I'm really happy the property has not been developed yet, and I'm really happy that it's along the vision that Bill and his team have really put together for it. So you guys know the slide you're looking at here. What we tend to do in the retail brokerage business is we outline all of the different retailers and entertainment uses that are around. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with it, but the property obviously sits right here with 36, adjacent to the new sports stable. An excellent addition, by the way, to the community, and I think also a great anchor for this project. Across the street on Highway 36, you've got a lot of different things that are going on. You may or may not know, Kohl's is going to be moving, probably toward the end of this year. Lowe's, I think, is probably going to stay, but there's a possibility that they actually could move as well. We're not sure yet. So there's going to be some of that big box vacancy occurring in Louisville. And, you know, you've got the marketplace here, which seems to be pretty stable with regard to the junior boxes, and I think will continue to be stable. What we're seeing in my business is internet's doing a lot of this to the retailers, but, you know, you're seeing a lot of retailers starting to have challenges, especially in the junior box and big box space, mainly because they're losing sales to the internet. So one place where we're not seeing that as much is in the entertainment venues. Theaters, indoor amusements, ninja training courses actually are starting to become, you know, something that's my kids want to go to as well. So we're starting to see a lot of a shift from the typical apparel big box retailing, shifting to the internet as well as to more boutique oriented retailers. So what we're looking at, I don't know if you have another slide you want to what we're looking at kind of as our target are going to be a lot of the restaurants, call it brew pubs or distillery production, chef-driven local restaurants that tend not to be the chain types. So we think there's probably a good, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 8 maybe of those types of uses, from the smaller QSRs, which are quick serve restaurants, to the larger full service restaurants. So that's going to be a large part of our focus. Apparel and clothing boutiques are also going to be a lot of the uses that we're going to be looking to bring in. And then we're going to be probably looking at some of the amenities and services that augment our lifestyles. They could be pet supplies, could be sporting goods, accessories. It could be what I call lifestyle services, which are along the lines of medical, dental, chiro, acupuncture, those kinds of services that tend to want to get shopped on a daily basis by the community and are needed actually in our lives today. We don't need as much of Talbot's or Coldwater Creek or those names that you may not have seen around in a while. And some of them still exist in malls, but really we're kind of moving away from that even. Then we're also going to be looking at entertainment more. We may try to get a theater, a larger format theater here, a la Alamo Draft House. I don't know if you guys have been down to the Westminster, the old Westminster Mall. There's one under construction right now. And then other entertainment venues that can help to vitalize this new downtown. And so we're in discussions with several of those as we speak. Yes?
Do you see these being more national tenants or kind of local mix? Or?
You know, I think it's going to be a mix of probably local, regional, and national. So we have national tenants that are talking to us right now. Really, they're trying to get an idea of timing. These things take a while to build sometimes, so if we're looking at a 20-month or a 22-month build period, they have to kind of be in their sweet spot for that.
Right.
Thanks, Alan. Sure.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. So again, I'm Bill Vitek with Dig Studio. You know, our focus on the project is really the creative placemaking and the walkability. Really, in essence, the exterior elements that are really going to make this project unique and memorable. And so we're drilling in now to the center green or plaza, and I apologize up front. I'm probably going to call it both throughout this discussion with you all. We're a little mixed on it because in reality it is both. It's going to have, as we're envisioning it right now, we're envisioning a very large, kind of green area, green in terms of a soft surface, maybe synthetic turf for water usage and year-round usage, but a centerpiece green that focuses on a stage amphitheater element right here. That could be something that is very light, very airy, could be a tensile fabric type of structure, it could be a really nice light metal type of structure, but it will have a strong focus of this open area right here to the amphitheater and stage. And then the other big moves of the plan itself around the green and the plaza is this big swooping arc walkway that's right here that connects Main Street right along here to the clubhouse and amenity center, which is right here. And we're envisioning that as this kind of nice scale pedestrian walkway that's highly activated on the edges in the buildings here with outdoor dining and storefronts that are very engaging. One of the challenges is when you have retail that is deep from the front of the street is how you activate those edges to get people back there. So you don't want those to be dead, you want those to really be lively. So this walkway with special paving, special lighting, accent planting, we really think will help draw people from Main Street back and then connect you to the residential core right here. And then again, activate it along the edges. Some of the other elements, program elements we're thinking about to really help activate the space and engage the edges. This is that pavilion building that Terry was talking about earlier. That could be, again, brew pub, distillery. It could have multiple levels. But the idea is, and you'll see some images of it coming up here shortly, but the idea is that this is a very iconic building. We're seeing it, the potential right now is something that would serve alcohol, so hence the need for some type of containment fence around here. But opening up into outdoor areas for seating, outdoor games, things like bocce, outdoor ping pong, cornhole, those types of activities that can really circulate and work around this building itself. And then over in this area, we're looking at an interactive water feature. You know, water is always a magnet for families and kids, and so we're seeing this as one of those pop jet fountains that come up out of the grounds, and you know, kids and adults love to run through, get wet, especially on days like today and yesterday, right? And so this circle in here, as well as some other small circles, we're seeing this all as kind of an interactive water feature. Lots of flexible seating and outdoor gathering space there, again, in more of a hard plaza configuration. What we've experienced in Colorado is that really in both hot weather and cold weather, people move with the sun, right? You know, in the summer, you're wanting to move out of the sun, you want to be under the shade tree and feel the coolness. But in days like yesterday, or we've just been having, you want to be in the sun and soaking it up after a long winter. So we think a lot of flexible seating is the right answer here in terms of creating that kind of space that you can sit here, watch your kids having a great time in the fountain, but be sitting around, enjoying something to eat and watching all the activity. Moving around down Main Street to the west, we're envisioning this area right here to be a climbing rock, maybe with a slack line, kind of built-in slack lines, if you've seen one of those, kind of combination agility type of feature right here. And then these series of elements right here, we're calling those kind of front porch swings that you could sit on and, again, watch your kids play here, watch activities going on in the town green, and again, really kind of engage in the space itself. You'll see a very strong diagonal patterns coming through. We do think that some strong directionality of the paving is really important to get people to come back into the space, to direct you down to the promenade, to bring you to the residential amenity center there. So you see a series of these angled walkways this way, this way, this way, which again, you know, kind of counterposed to that big broad sweeping arc, but again, it gives you some direct cues and walkway definition to get back into the space itself. But again, kind of the central feature is the town green right here, with all of these elements that they begin to then circulate off of that town green as kind of the center fulcrum piece. And then some of the things I just described is just some precedent images from other places, but again, talked about flexible seating with, you know, portable shade devices, umbrellas. In front of DUS, obviously the interactive fountain, which, you know, turns in more like a kid's playground these days than anything, but that's great because it brings activity, it brings excitement, it brings people. Maybe some interesting sculptural seating. These large kind of precast pebbles could be used, again, strategically placed under trees for shade and key areas to overview activities. Apologize, it's a little dark slide here, but the idea of a climbing rock right here that would be in that large triangular open space. And then the town green could be just you know, a great space for a multitude of activities, everything from outdoor movies in the summer to some of the great events you have here in town, like the chili cook-off, the beginning of the race that you have, you know, spill off from farmers markets. There's just really a whole multitude of events that could occur within that town green space. So that's why that center is very flexible. This is a view kind of standing right at the corner of the sports stable, looking west. So again, the building that Terry was talking about, the building, and he'll get more into the architecture here in just a minute. But the idea is that we really want to build upon the great things you've done on Main Street already. We really like the special paving, the decorative lights, the zero curb, you know, all those things that really say this is more about a pedestrian space than it is a vehicle space. And so kudos to you for going in that direction, and we really think that's something to leverage on Main Street as we continue to move forward. We're just starting to show some more enhanced areas of plantings that can make these They're kind of specialty corners that could be, really bright pops of color and interest. If you've, been like through areas like Cherry Creek in Denver, how they have a real strong planting program in there. So I think, again, Main Street and on the corners all along here can have that same type of potential. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, we're going to see several slides showing the architecture, and the architecture and the materials and the colors are all kind of inspired by the original coal mine history of Superior. So you'll see a lot of dark colors, quite intentionally, and but a variety of colors and a variety of materials. So it looks like the buildings weren't built as a project, but built over time as kind of traditional town.
This is a view looking at one of those directional walks we were talking about earlier. So we're looking towards the residential amenity center. Town Green is to your right. The stage amphitheater back here. Again, something that's light, but so it doesn't block views to the wonderful architecture that Terry's going to do here. But something that could provide coverage and relief from the sun for outdoor, again, concerts and events, or movies and whatnot. This is those front porch swings I was talking about earlier, climbing rock right here. All along the edge here of this walkway, we can see built-in low seat walls that become, overflow seating elements. So again, things that just really encourage pedestrian activity, pedestrian seating and lingering. And again, we think that this space here could just really be used for a great multitude of uses. That's the Crescent Walk on the backside right here.
And just north of that walk is the one-story commercial buildings we were talking about. The storefront ability to really open up and spill out onto the plaza. And then at the kind of the axial end of this diagonal walkway is the entrance to the residential clubhouse.
So another view looking down Main Street. We're actually standing looking east now with the sports stable at the end. The park and Town Green would be right here. But again, looking closely at how the architecture engraves the street, and again, playing off of materiality that you've done so well on the existing Main Street in terms of the bollards, the detectable strips, the special paving, all of those elements we think are good cues for us to take and layer into the project as it moves forward, so that there's a cohesiveness about this overall sense of what downtown Superior is all about.
Yeah, we love that notion of the zero curb there, that you can just walk across without confronting a curb going from sidewalk on one side to the opposite side. So we're hoping this is starting to illustrate kind of the vitality and vibrancy of the neighborhood. A lot of tall storefronts on the ground floor, a lot of transparency as you're walking down. There's visual interest into what's happening behind those glass walls. And then on the upper level, got the residential, which really provide kind of a key from a safety security standpoint. It's more eyes on the street. You've got two layers of folks living in flats over the commercial space on the ground floor. I was going to say, this is the iconic building, which we've kind of illustrated here as a container building, but this is the one thing that we really haven't figured out yet, because this is, I think this is something that we really want to have community input from, and really needs to have a function which will kind of tend to drive what the building actually is.
But there's a tenant input too. I mean, it depends on, if it's a brewery, it wants to be one thing. If it's I don't know what else, some other fun use, it wants to be maybe something else. And this could be potentially just a build to suit where we leave this corner reserved, we show some architecture for it, but ultimately if we get a specific brand in here, they may have their own architecture that they want to introduce. So, that's just part of the opportunity here, is to bring something special to this corner.
As it's envisioned right now, what kind of tenant would that be?
It would be some kind of almost like a pop-up restaurant or,
Gotcha.
or
Okay.
bar kind of situation. Now, The part of the interesting thing is being able to experience town green from the upper level. So we're actually showing it a rooftop terrace that you can look down on the activity of the town green. But the really important thing to drill home is we really don't really think that the plaza or the green ought to just spill out onto Main Street and to the sports castle, but really be anchored at this corner. Really, it's kind of the center of everything, if you will.
Yeah, bringing a private use like this to the public plaza, we've seen it successfully done at places like Santana Row and other places where you have Santana Row has a little wine shop in the middle of their park. It gives you a reason to come out there, whereas the plaza by itself, it's a great space, it's a great public function, and that's important. We still have that in the main flexible area, but bringing a private use that sells, potentially food and alcohol gives you a reason to come out and be there. They can have heaters, they can have more active management of some of these games and things that really create more activity on the corner than might otherwise develop it naturally.
And architecturally, it really shows kind of the intentional use of a variety of materials and colors, including a variety of masonry colors.
This view is looking at the, going west now, looking at kind of the intersection of that broad sweeping crescent walkway I was talking about with the promenade that goes to the north and ultimately connects to the park. So it's that kind of that key fulcrum point between those two. We think, again, all along this edge, there could be some special lighting features, some special landscaping. We'll be very sensitive to utilize landscape in a way that provides a rhythm, but also doesn't overly block retail behind, but gets a lot of interest and color in the ground plane and the shrub layer through here. We could envision a restaurant on that corner. We have a big area of open space it could spill out onto, again, whether it's a green surface or games, like the brewery down off of Santa Fe, that area out in back. I'm trying to remember, is it Breckenridge Brewery, or they've got the cornhole and horseshoes and the picnic tables and all that. That very easily, kind of that feel could be accommodated within the space right here. So it's a really nice intersection, and I think what Terry and I and the team have always talked about is that it's this combination of the retail with the residential that really helps activate the spaces. So you're getting that kind of activity going throughout the day and throughout the evening, and throughout all the seasons of the year to really help make for a successful place.
There are a few places, and this just being one of them, where the architecture can really expand out to be more of an indoor-outdoor kind of space. Here it's hard to see in this kind of darkened slide, but we've tried to illustrate this as like maybe a beer garden kind of situation.
Again, another view kind of looking through the plaza area. This is, one of the other strong diagonal walks. We're looking back at the sports stable here. Again, the iconic building right there that we were just focusing on, more the aerial perspective. This would be the area for interactive water feature. So again, we've seen some great spaces done where you actually have like little movable animals and things that help encourage people to interact with the water feature themselves. And again, a combination of flexible seating that can be rearranged, but maybe some areas too where we do some built-in seating around trees and benches just to give a little bit more opportunity for seating in some of those wonderful, 50-degree days we get in February too, where maybe all the outdoor furniture or the movable furniture is put away, but there's still a place to come and be and warm yourself in the sun. Again, this is the Main Street edge here. You can see the angled parking, and then with the focus, again, back to the sports stable. Again, a view looking along the Crescent Walkway, back to the residential clubhouse. Again, that engagement right here with the outdoor dining, the special paving. Here's the amphitheater, lawn area, and then the stage would be back in this area right here.
We're also thinking that these buildings really could be a canvas for art as well. So we've kind of drawn a super graphics on the side of the building, but really it's really kind of a blank canvas right now that may be a way to introduce art in an unexpected different way here.
Yeah, we'd like to bring in more sculpture as well as murals, on the actual buildings, and trying to do, and we're going to keep working on this with the architecture also, but trying to make it feel like a place that's been built up over time and less like a project that was plopped down here in a year or two, which is really what it is. And that's always a design challenge, but the more I think you can incorporate different artists as well as different materials and different architecture, I think that's going to go a long way towards making it feel like an authentic place that feels right and doesn't feel like too much of a manufactured space.
And we're aware of the RFP you have out on the street right now for the placemaking and the public art process. So we currently see lots of opportunity within the town green and plaza area for the integration of those elements. And we obviously welcome the opportunity to work with whoever you select on that to really start to think about how we would integrate that, make that be an additive piece to the placemaking and the uniqueness of what this downtown Superior town green space can be all about.
I have a quick tactical question on that retail block 7 lot 1. I assume that all fronts to the green and that the parking in the back, that's just for loading. There's no second entrance there. Is that accurate?
There may be a secondary entrance in the back, just like you see with the, if you go over to Wayne's in the marketplace and that whole strip center, those tennis spaces typically have at least one public access door out the back that fronts their sort of main street, although it doesn't function as well as this would. So you may have some secondary access from the actual parking area to provide convenience for customers.
But there would be no storefront.
No, generally the big storefront is in front. There may be an access door in the back, and then loading obviously would be off of the back, off the parking area.
Okay.
So this is a view from the, what might be considered the entrance corner as you're coming across Coal Creek. So this is Marshall on the right and Creekview on the left, going off at that intersection. And you can see the kind of the vertical expression of these, even though they're horizontal flats, the units within, the buildings have a vertical expression to them to feel more like townhouses marching down the street. Again, with the same kind of variety of architecture, colors and materials.
We've also started to introduce some more ground floor private stoops that front that street that really start to make it feel more like potentially a private condo or townhouse where you have, private uses and patio chairs and things like that spilling out towards the public right of way, which I think is nice and unique for this type of product. A lot of times you'll just see sort of a less pedestrian activity at the ground floor than this will have. So I think that's a good bonus to this project. I mean, you see every building will have a main entrance, which goes into a corridor system that serves all the units above with an interior stair. So that main door is shown here, and each building would have one of those main doors sort of signified by some extra lighting and a dress and a nice canopy and double doors that kind of announce the entrance to those main spaces.
And those ground floor units with the stoops will be the ones that will be snatched up by the dog owners.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it accurate that it will say Downtown Superior as the branding, or is that a placeholder for
That's a
an apartment
placeholder.
complex
That's a placeholder. No, TBD.
So it would be more likely to be the actual apartment names there.
It could be the Lost at Superior. We could adopt potentially the Downtown Superior branding. I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
So before we leave this slide, I just want to clarify. So Creekview Way was initially designed to be parallel parking, and I think if I recall, the concept is now diagonal parking.
That's right.
Because I mean, I look at the overall, and it looks like there's a massive amount of parking. And just as a biker, I'm not a big fan of diagonal parking because I would get run over. You never see me, and I don't see bike lanes defined anywhere. It's just a question of, in order to create the diagonal parking, what did you do? Did you widen the street? Did you move the setback?
Yeah, widen the street. So generally the sort of drivable lanes won't have changed from the original sections, where you before would have had an 8-foot side section for parallel parking. Now we have probably a 14-foot or 10 to 14-foot section for that diagonal parking. We think it's relatively important, and this is actually the last image. I'll go back to the site plan. We think it's relatively important because while there is a fair amount of surface parking, we are just at the required limits, and this is pending, again, some more detailed analysis by a shared parking consultant.
Just under the limits, right?
Yeah, we actually, I think we actually have a deficit of a couple spaces that again, those numbers are going to move around a little bit as we get through the detailed analysis. But we're right at the limit. These would be public parking spaces. I think they'll be well used, both for visitors to our project and for visitors to the park, so ultimately I think it's more of a public benefit than anything. But it is, you're right, a change from the PD showed parallel along that side. It probably adds, we should do the numbers, but I'm guessing it adds 15 to 20 spaces from what was there before. So with that, I think that's all of our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions or accept any comments or.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we have the goggles.
Yeah, maybe while we go through some question and answers, we'll pull up the virtual reality we have and show that, as well as, I'm sorry we don't have 10 pairs of VR goggles, but we have one that you can all pass around and start looking into the space itself, if that's okay.
That's the
Oh, gotcha. It's nice and short.
So Bill, where you approach that, if board members have questions?
I'm happy to start with a question around, on Main Street. Are you able to pull it up or? No.
Let me just open this real fast to show you these and then we'll.
So a question that doesn't involve the map. The clubhouse, is that intended to serve just the multifamily, or is that intended to also serve the townhouses that'll be along the southern perimeter as well?
Just the multifamily.
Just the multifamily.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Letters in there.
Upper here.
It's a really easy address.
So as far as the green goes that's facing the amphitheater, I think it's a great open space. I'm curious what you've seen in other communities as far as how often and how that gets used when there's not an actual event in the amphitheater going on.
Yeah. Well, I think, the great thing about the project here is you've got all the residential around you, so if it's not an active program like an outdoor movie or a Friday afternoon jazz concert or whatever, you have that green space because the residential, the immediate, multifamily residential around you, there's, that maybe some of them have front stoops that we're talking about, but this really becomes their yard, right?
I see.
So this becomes their front yard, their backyard, and I think that's what really helps build community is that kind of gets people out of their units and people start mingling, start walking, and so I think just inherently by the density, the amount of units that we have, that will help stimulate that activity of people being out and being in that open space.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm curious, Bill, on kind of how you settled on the number of units, like the kind of that conflict between maximizing folks to make your retail successful versus density and parking, and can you tell us kind of why you landed where you did?
Yeah, we looked at a lot of different options. I mean, as you know, we've looked at a lot of different options over the years. With Morgan, we looked at a couple of different options starting about 6 months ago, maybe more. We did look at a potential higher density plan that had roughly the 800 units that are allowed. That construction type requires taller buildings as well as structured parking, whether it's subterranean or in the middle. And we felt like, it was kind of pushing back against a lot of the comments that we've gotten that maybe the 1,400 is too much. Even though that is what's allowed in the PD, that it's a maximum, and we didn't necessarily want to push up against that maximum and provide more density than the town was looking for. You also get into a lot, it's a totally different construction cost when you get into those bigger, denser buildings. So, when we look at this project, this version of it, it's relying on that 3-story surface park solution. And really the number is a function of what you can fit with this product type. We could fit more if we went to a taller building type that had structured parking, but we, didn't think that was ultimately feasible. So.
And then from a market perspective, you feel like this, number of units and regional growth and things exited?
Oh, absolutely.
Doesn't
sure.
And somebody said.
And there's going to be bringing more people in.
Right. Kind of a regional draw, not just these folks, right?
Yep.
Is this going to be kind of a combination of for sale for rent product? Do you know yet kind of how that's going to shake out?
We're still looking at all the options there. I would imagine certainly the townhomes are going to continue to be for sale like a lot of the existing townhomes are. And we'll see as it transitions into the Main Street and then the multifamily, how that works.
Configuration of the multifamily, are there units above one another, or, okay.
Yeah, the multifamily with stacked flats is 3 stories of separate units, one ground floor unit, second floor and third floor that would each be their own, served by an internal stair or potentially an elevator along Main Street. But yeah, they'd be stacked on top of each other.
Can you talk maybe a little bit about the Marshall Street kind of alignment where you aren't necessarily doing kind of a frontage alignment, but you've got them, more east-west oriented? I'm curious if that, the rationale behind that design.
We looked at, how many different schemes did we look at? We looked at as many ways to configure this as possible. And this is the one that we felt hid as much parking as we could. Even though the ends of the buildings are along Marshall, the buildings are close together. So I think the impression you'll get by arriving and looking down Marshall will be a series of buildings that really look out towards Marshall. It's not like you're seeing the end of the building because the units we've oriented those units to face Marshall.
Right. So this is kind of that.
This is that view.
This is Marshall.
1, 2, 3. So you're looking at the ends of 4 buildings merging along there. So, and it's quite a challenge to get that many buildings that close together and still park it appropriately. So.
I think part of that too is taking advantage of the really incredible neighbor we have here with the park and the views of the Flatiron, so facing as many units as possible out towards that park, as opposed to, if you didn't do it this way, you'd have to do it the other way, where you had the ends of the buildings facing the park. And I think ultimately we decided it's better to have more access off of Marshall, which is a bigger road, and more units, facing the park and the Flatirons there. And then, again, not trying to hide these surface parking lots as much as possible.
I think one of the other great features of the way the site plan is oriented is that whether you're on the street here, looking out and seeing the park as Bill was just describing, or if you're one of the interior units, your fronts are looking out onto the promenade, so it's a very highly amenitized pedestrian type of space. Or even like these 2 buildings that have a kind of a green corridor or little U's in between them. So each one of those buildings has some orientation to exterior open space, which we think is a real selling feature for the site plan.
Bill, can you talk about opportunities for town civic space, specifically build a building for town civic space that we've talked about for?
Yeah, so I have to wear my RC Superior hat now, right? And I've got to constantly kind of differentiate. So for this specific project, Morgan Ranch DTS has gone into contract to buy this land based on the fact that they can develop all the land as private development. RC Superior, the master developer, has an obligation to the town to provide the parks and community space somewhere in the project, pending that bond issuance and the language in the cost sharing agreement. So the way it's currently considered is there wouldn't be community space in this red dashed area. It would ultimately go somewhere else in the master plan under RC Superior's obligation. That said, if you want something inside of this area, RC Superior can certainly consider it and ask Morgan Ranch if it's amenable to a contract amendment or figure out some kind of a joint deal. We're open to discussion. It really depends on what cash is available to fund that obligation under RC Superior, and then what exactly the town wants and where it should go. We have talked a little bit about the potential for some of this commercial space to be conveyed to the town in exchange for that capital that RC Superior owes the town. I think that is one certainly possibility. I think it depends on how the retail leasing goes on these ground floors. If this ground floor commercial is leasing up great to really exciting restaurant and retail uses, I think we all would prefer that it be restaurant and retail uses than be a community civic space use on the ground floor. I'm just guessing because it generates tax revenue and it's more exciting generally than a community space. We could potentially put a community space elsewhere in the project, but if leasing isn't going well and we have a bunch of dark retail, of course, then it's a lot more it's a lot more interesting, I think, to both of us to have potential community space there. So all of that said, it's still flexible. I'm open to looking at whatever you want us to look at, but we don't know for sure yet.
So when you say somewhere else in the project, are you specifically talking about blocks 2, 5, or 8?
Generally, yeah, those are the remaining blocks that don't have commitments yet. So it could be part of this future hotel development as a piece of that. It could be a standalone piece elsewhere on block 5 or built into this parking structure. It could be a standalone piece somewhere on block 2 or 8, which are currently unspoken for. So.
Okay. Since we're talking about the land use, sticking with that, looking at just the overall zoning for each of these blocks, the majority of it is flex space, which allows for lots of different uses. And I apologize, maybe you answered this to Lisa's question. I had the VR on. Almost everything you chose was residential. Not seeing a lot of office or live work within the actual, well, I live work with bottom commercial, but any office considerations for second and third level along Main Street?
You know, so office is really a separate asset class, and when you're looking at pretty much any developer, they're going to tend towards either residential, retail, or office. You know, Morgan Ranch is sort of not making a stretch, but already accommodating two of those asset classes by doing this mixed use retail, commercial, and residential use. There is potential for some office use in the ground floor commercial space along here, whether it be co-working or small format creative. What we're not planning on doing is any kind of large format build-to-suit 250,000 square foot office building, which is really what we have planned for more likely blocks 2 and 8. There's actually zoning restrictions out here that restrict residential uses along this frontage and require it to be commercial. So that's where it makes sense, certainly from the zoning standpoint, to be either, you know, more of a sort of junior anchor, potentially grocery. We showed here at one point. I think that's relatively unlikely at this point, just given the state of the market and where all the grocers are. But it could be a standalone retail use, or it could be a bigger format office building. But we're not, you know, we're not in the position to do any kind of serious office use as part of this project. I do think, sorry to interrupt you, I do think that, you know, creating this Main Street is going to be kind of a coup for the project and for the town, and creating that really urban, walkable, retail, cool vibe place. That is what's going to allow us to attract tenants who want this kind of tech office space and larger format stuff. So from a master developer standpoint, you know, I would love that. We've been marketing this for office use since I've been involved for 3 years, and have entertained a couple of tenants that nothing's worked out yet. So we're still working on that. I think developing Main Street with this stuff that we have planned under this project is going to go a long way towards finishing that kind of that attractiveness and demand for office use on blocks 2 and 8.
Yeah, I mean, what I was picturing in my mind isn't necessarily the large scale you're talking about, but something for like the boutique or niche, a law firm.
No, we have, you know, we have 70,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space. It's not just retail. It could certainly be boutique law or architecture firm or other kind of small format creative office uses. Absolutely, I think that's actually a great infill, you know, especially if there's trouble leasing retail.
Yeah, I was talking about second floor though.
The problem with that is then we start getting too dense and we don't have the parking for it.
Right.
You know, I'd love to keep building up, but to do that, you start to need more structured parking, which then affects the economics of the whole deal, and it just starts to not make sense for this piece. This structured parking that's envisioned to be funded by the Metro District, by the public dollars eventually, once they're available, will drive additional office density that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get without that structured parking. So that is still the plan. It's just not part of this immediate project.
So I guess I have a couple questions. First, parking's going to be parking's already an issue there, right? I mean, you're asking, we built the sports stable, which is, you know, you could have hundreds of people lugging heavy hockey bags, often moms and dads lugging heavy hockey bags for the kids during tournaments. When it's crowded during tournaments, there's already no place to park here. I'm very worried about the parking, and we'll look closely for that. I would have loved to have seen a concept review that included the parking garage as part of this initial plan. So I'm disappointed that it did not include it. So I recognize that you guys are going to run the numbers, and you're going to say it's got X amount of spaces that meets the appropriate PD. This is not yet a pedestrian-friendly area. People are going to move, and they're going to have 2 cars. They might even have 3 cars. Maybe one day hopefully they'll live there for a year and a half or 2 years and realize they could walk to the bus, that they don't need 2 or 3 cars, that they only need 1, or they don't need any. But for now, there's going to be a lot of cars. In other neighborhoods that are like this, you can tell when somebody's trying to have people over to watch the national championship basketball game, which we will not be watching this evening, or to have 6 different contractors redo their floors. There's no place for these folks to park. I'm very worried about the parking. So I guess I want you to address that. I'm not sure, the other thing, I'm not sure, on planning area 3, I think there was a bit of a disconnect between ranch capital in the town, between the concept of super blocks and what our expectations were. When I see blocks 9 and 10 compared to, say, 13 and 25, I never thought 9 and 10 were super blocks. I wanted everything in planning area 2 really oriented towards Main Street. You split blocks 9 and 10, and you have townhouses. You could look at this. You could have townhouses that are pretty far. I mean, they're not far from they're maybe 60 yards from Main Street, but those things aren't anywhere. Those aren't built around Main Street. They're built closer. They're oriented to each other. They're not oriented around Main Street. They're just proximity to Main Street. So I was surprised by the way blocks 9 and 10 were split. And then on my third question, there's a nuance around the different types of flex space. So 9, 10, and a little sliver of 6 have some flex space requirements, allowing 25% of Main Street ground floor frontage built as live work. Are there any related to that, or are there any proposed variances or exceptions that will need to be made, either related to the flex space, 25%, parking, or anything else that are expected? I know your height you already commented on.
So no, certainly not height. On the flex space with the live work limitation on it is that on basically, basically this half of this block, and this entire block, you're allowed to do residential on the ground floor, where you're not allowed to do it on the other phases. You are allowed to do residential on the ground floor, but you can only do residential up to 75% of the frontage of those spaces, or otherwise it's not allowed within the 25%. Right now we're proposing all commercial. We are looking at options to bring some residential live workspace to the ground floor. For KTGY, we'll continue to explore that as part of the FDP application, but certainly we won't be asking for a variance for that. At most, we would have 75% of that ground floor be the live workspace. Other variances that we did take a look at some variances. The one thing that I can think of is the parking that we already talked about on Creekview Way, where the PD showed parallel. We're proposing diagonal. I think that's a positive change just because it provides more public parking, which in general is a good thing. But that is a change from a small change from the PD. Are there any other zoning variances that we're looking at?
No, not really. The couple little things were, like you were saying, or the parking, maybe looking at some of the property lines, or there's a curved property line along the plaza, which we're not trying to build a curved building, so maybe looking at that.
There may be a minor lot line adjustment where we got that sort of piano-shaped curve along the north side of the plaza. Now we're
proposing buildings with flat frontages because that's what retailers want. I think we still generally fit within that piano curve, but there may be some slight adjustment to property lines that were shown in the lat. We will keep the developable area versus the public area even regardless, so it's not going to affect really the underlying zoning and approvals. But in general, no, we're not planning on asking for any major variances or exceptions.
And why not, so can you talk about why you split blocks, I suppose 9, 10, and 11 in that way? Bunch of, how many townhouses are in there?
67, I think.
And did you look at any other alternatives?
Yeah, so one alternative that we started with, that I talked to earlier, was that higher density alternative that had, small wrap buildings with parking structures each on those south blocks. That would require kind of maxing out the height limits and building a much more expensive construction type that is taller and denser. Ultimately, like I said, we decided that wasn't feasible, partly due to construction costs and partly due to the kind of desire to come in comfortably below the density maximums. If you didn't do, really the buildings, the front Main Street make a lot of sense the way they are, and they're modeled after kind of your prototypical old town, downtown, Arvada or Boulder. It's a 60 to 70 foot deep building, which is perfect for retail space, very leasable. It also provides 2 30-foot deep residential units above with a corridor in the middle. So that building just makes all the sense in the world. It's very efficient and it's very attractive. That has a parking area behind it because it needs at least some proximate convenient parking, both for the residents and the retail. And then south of that, we could have done potentially more multifamily stacked flats. We kind of like the idea of transitioning into this lower density product as you get into the block 13 and 25 existing residential, that this creates a neighbor for those people who already live there, which is not going to be a surprise. It's more of the same product, it's very compatible, and you'll have that 67 units as opposed to what could have been potentially 200 units if you did smaller stacked flats. Again, the problem, that just adds to the parking demand problems and everything else. So we like the idea of transitioning into that existing product towards the south property line. And it's a product that the town's seen, the residents know. It's, it seems like a relatively easy one to understand.
So I have a question. How will this be phased in terms of build out? Would you look at doing residential first and then coming back with some of the other amenities? Or?
Yeah, so all of those Main Street buildings have retail on the ground floor with residential above. So we'll have to build that retail at the same time the residential's building. Generally, we're looking at it as a single phase project. Obviously there will be some sort of construction logistics and phasing through building out the individual buildings and how that works, which one delivers first and that kind of thing. But in general, we're not looking at doing like one project and then another one 2 years later. We're going to build it all as mostly a single phase project, and just kind of, you'll see, like I said, logistics as it relates to some of the tenant leasing or individual tenant spaces. We likely won't build the build-to-suit retail buildings that are standalone retail. We probably won't build until there's a tenant for it, because a lot of these tenants have specific requirements, that they want a certain storefront or signage or architecture, and so we likely won't wait to build those until we have tenants signed up for them. But even that, the expectations will lease those over the next 1 to 2 years as we finish approvals and start construction and be ready to deliver those spaces all as a single big delivery over the next, sort of 2020 to 21.
How delayed do you think that signature building would be from the others? Because I know you said that.
Hopefully not at all. I mean, that to me is a really attractive space. And we're going to go out with Alan and his team with a really kind of concerted retail leasing effort here in the next month or so, pending everyone's feedback and general positive vibes. But if it looks good and everyone generally likes the plan, we'll go out, try to start leasing these retail spaces. Hopefully that's one of the first spaces to go because it's so interesting and attractive, and we'll have someone signed up by the time we're ready to start construction. Okay. And then there's no delay at all. But
So it's more the office space in blocks 2 and 8 that would be.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, 2, well, so everything on blocks 2, 8, and 5 is not part of this project.
Understood.
We're talking about now,
yes.
and there's no contracts for any of that. I am still working on theater deals for Block 5, which we would love to get a theater deal. I'm still working on hotel deals for Block 5. We're always, we've got our office brokers out there, talk to them every week, trying to find office tenants. So all of that is still very much in the works and in the plan. But like I said, I think getting Main Street done is going to go a long way towards attracting those uses. So.
Did I miss any images of the townhomes? Was that included in the?
No, so the townhomes, we'll bring on a partner who we haven't decided on yet. It'll likely be either Remington, Wonderland, or Thrive, or Boulder Creek, one of the guys we're working with right now. They'll actually design and build those townhomes. So that'll be part of the FDP, and you'll see that design come in, but it would be pretty similar to what you see on Block 13, 25, that type of stuff.
I think you guys did a tremendous job here. I think so much of the success of this project is just kind of the feel of, when you come into a Main Street area and you feel the town, right? You instantly drive down Main Street and you're like, this is a cool town. And other towns you drive down Main Street and you're like, this town's dying, or this town's not that great. So much of the success of this project, I think, depends on the execution of the town, Main Street. I think the plaza is beautiful. I think it's really cool. There's obviously been a lot of thought and attention to it. We didn't see too much about, it seems like a lot of the focus of the presentation today was on plaza more so than on Main Street. But there was comments made about balconies, Juliet balconies, al fresco dining along Main Street. I think all of that is like an absolute must, and that kind of adds to the feel of like a legitimate downtown area that people want to live in, notwithstanding the fact that they've got a commercial user underneath. I think ground floor along Main Street has to be commercial. I know you said 75% could be residential. It's got to be commercial. When you drive down a successful Main Street, they don't have residential on the ground floor. They have commercial. So I know that's a challenge, but it's a challenge that this project, I think, merits. I think the landmark, plaza tenant is a really cool idea. I like that idea. I think the plaza is it's going to be amazing, and I think it's really going to give identity to the community. But Main Street itself, I think, needs to give identity, and it already is so beautiful with the brick pavers and the street lights. So I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to really make Main Street the focal point. I think the plaza should be something that complements Main Street. I don't think Main Street should complement the plaza. And then with respect to the rest of just kind of the plan, I'm a little concerned about Kevin's point about parking. It seems like we've got a lot of surface parking here, and we're losing out on an opportunity to really, this is an urban environment and should be dense. And most towns that have a lot of surface parking lots, when they realize that they have a problem with that, they're filling in, right? Denver was, a lot of the brownstones in the 70s were scraped and surface parking lots were put in, and now they're slowly filling in. And if you could do that over again, they probably wish they didn't, scrape those brownstones. So, in terms of like the northern section above the plaza, that seems like it's a massive parking lot. I understand we've got to support the retail there, but it's just concerning, and I think that the ability to make it really pedestrian friendly is lost if we have a sea of concrete where people are going to be parking. I don't really have any concern with the way Main Street's laid out with the plaza, with the retail area. The townhomes, I'm concerned about the orientation. If we want to have this be a pedestrian friendly environment, our design guidelines say that the front doors need to orient to the street for like a really pedestrian friendly environment. We need to have the front doors orienting to the street. So I don't know how you reconfigure that, but stacking them horizontally instead of east-west instead of north-south, I think we're missing out on notice that old railway. We're missing out on an opportunity to really activate that street. And instead, if it's built that way, when you're driving down it, if you're walking down it, you're not going to feel like you're actually walking down a place where people live, right? You're not going to be seeing people's front doors. You're not going to really feel kind of connection to that street because it's just going to be these stacked townhomes there. The way that everything's laid out, to the north end of the development, I think that makes more sense. I'm more concerned about kind of the southern townhomes and how those are stacked. I guess the other point that Terry mentioned is the zero curb. We've got the zero curb already built. I'm interested to see how, because one of the original concepts with the zero curb was this would enable festivals and farmers markets along Main Street. You can close down Main Street and really activate that downtown core. I'd like to see that kind of factored into the way the plaza works, right? Because they should be complementing each other rather than having like two distinct spaces. Like right now, is the farmers market going to be in the plaza? Is the farmers market going to be along Main Street? I'm not sure there's a right or a wrong answer. Maybe it's something that you experiment with and see what works better. But it just seems like the zero curb was such a good idea that it should be, utilized and not necessarily forgotten about.
To that end, while I realize that Main Street and the parking there has already been built, is there a possibility of getting rid of those 2 parking spaces that the red pathway opens up to? Because I noticed even as we're looking through the virtual reality, you kind of come down that red pathway and then all of a sudden you're confronted with bollards and cars right there. I kind of think 2 spaces wouldn't be a huge loss if we could then have that continue across Main Street.
The problem, so I prefer not to lose the spaces.
Okay.
The issue from a design standpoint with that is really right now this is designed to bring people from the clubhouse here and Promenade in front of this retail and out to Main Street, kind of towards this building, which could be either this way or this way. The only reason it doesn't go directly to the corner is because we think it's better activated by having a building here. If you take these spaces away and sort of redesign this street for that to be a pedestrian crossing, now you have really a pedestrian crossing, which is sort of mid-block. It doesn't have a stop sign. You have a pedestrian crossing right here that's protected by a stop sign. And I think what we want to do is have people come down here and realize, I need to walk 20 feet to the right so I get to the protected crosswalk that's safer, rather than having them directly come across here. I do agree with the comment that we need to integrate the plaza into the street and think about times when the street is closed. That won't be all the time, but potentially it's once a month or once every other week or whatever it is. You could have a farmer's market, to answer your question, either in the parking spaces with pedestrian area in the middle or in this really flexible plaza space. And maybe to your point, we try both of them and see which one is more attractive. The retailers are going to have something to say about that too. Permanent retailers always have some trepidation over farmers market and people taking their sales. So they always want to have really good kind of access and visibility to the area that has the farmers market. But we certainly will look at how this edge of the plaza engages with this sidewalk and with that street, so that when they're open, you feel like it's all part of the same space.
So Bill, I feel like on Promenade, the intent of, I feel like we've sort of lost Promenade here, particularly with the entrance for Clubhouse. Right, I mean, the spirit of what is in the PD Amendment 3, Parcel K, which is 1.72 acres, which already got squeezed down a little bit. The fact that that now is the entrance to a clubhouse that's not only not available to the community, if I understand correctly, but it's not even available to everybody that's in planning area too. Feels like I think that clubhouse is a fine amenity for that neighborhood. I have not heard a compelling reason why the entrance to that amenity needs to be on the town square. In fact, I would go as far as say, I don't think I would support it, the entrance to the clubhouse from town square, unless there's some compelling reason. Promenade is the town. All of Promenade is the town square, right? It's not just parcel K, that's Promenade all the way up to Creekview. I don't want to lose any of it. You know, there were nice pictures of, you know, the lights hanging in the alley, and that alley got squeezed a little, and I've got Rita in my head saying, wait a minute, we want to make sure it's not too dark. I like the buildings aren't as high as they potentially could be, but I feel strongly about protecting all of the 1.72 acres of parcel K.
No, there was no intent to change the property line, so if the numbers are off.
It just feels like, well, it just feels like, I understand you'd adjust the property lines, but if the entrance, the spirit of, to me, Promenade, that's where people are selling hats and T-shirts, not walking into a private clubhouse, right?
I think on the flip side, maybe, is that it activates the space. I'm not sure if that's what you're...
That is the intent. I mean, so the clubhouse has a fitness center on the ground floor. It's where all of the activity, public activity associated with that multifamily project is going to be. And so, you know, we thought that bringing that activity to activate the plaza, again, everything we can do to get people into this plaza and visible from the plaza, like bringing that little jewel building onto the corner and having this residential amenity that activates it during, you know, weeknights and when people are using the pool tables in the fitness center, those are good things for the plaza. And so we did that on purpose to bring that activity to that corner of the plaza. It's really, you know, that's not leasable retail space. So it's not going to be retail space facing the plaza because there's not really parking to support it and there's not visibility that retail needs. So, you know, you could do, if it weren't that, it could be, I don't know what it could be, because it can't be residential on the ground floor because it's not zoned for it.
Let me just do a quick check-in on time. We're at about 6:22, and at 6:50 we need to wrap up so we can break down the tables and set up for the regular meeting. So I want to make sure we get through all the questions, but I'd also like to hear from all the trustees, specifically with feedback. They're really looking for feedback here on kind of what we think of various things. So thanks.
I do have a concern, though, I think mimicking what Kevin was saying, though, as far as losing an opportunity to utilize Promenade. The way that restaurant at the end, you know, I think the original intent maybe aligned that restaurant at the end, you know, more in the sight line of Promenade. And it feels like kind of an empty space in your plan. You haven't really talked about it, but, you know, yeah, up in there, that space. Right, so, and you haven't really shown images. It feels like maybe that's still really premature. I'm not sure if you guys are actually ready to go there with this application yet, but I think when I was envisioned Promenade, I really envisioned Promenade serving, you know, kind of as that strong north-south connection between the park and the plaza, and that restaurant being a pretty cool amenity, you know, and a draw really to connect those spaces. And it looks on your plan like you're still fleshing that out. It doesn't look like you've really figured that out yet, but I think how you're showing it leaves Promenade. There's not a there at the end, you know, maybe with that restaurant offset, or if you're going to provide some, you know, activated spaces to the east of the restaurant, I'm not sure. It looks like you're still kind of noodling through all that, but I think Promenade, to Kevin's point, I totally agree. It's an extension of the plaza. It needs to be active. It needs to be a draw. Folks need to be utilizing that. So just, yeah.
And to jump on the plaza, I love it. I think you guys did great with it. This is the exact space that I have been hoping for. I take my family out to try to find a splash pad, so whatever you do, don't get rid of that splash pad. It's a huge draw for my kids. But I mean, this is a fun area where on a weekend, Friday, Saturday night, you can go, there's fun things for adults, you've got jazz going on, you've got stuff for the kids. I mean, it's something for the whole family. So I love that, but I share the exact same concern Kevin did, that this is supposed to be a space in my mind that benefits our entire community. We've got 13,000 people who already live here, and here we've got almost an entire side of that plaza that's for the private residents of this one small section of town. So that's a little frustrating. I don't know the answer, but I would love to see something that can be used by the entire town, not that tiny little section. Further, just I've got other comments, but my other big concern, and then I'll let others go, is, again, parking. I'm concerned about the sports stable continuing to be successful. At the same time, we have other events going on. while having all these shared use spots for the residents?
I see an opportunity, that clubhouse, to integrate that somehow into this civic community space that we've been looking for, event space. It's perfectly located. I like the idea of having some clubhouse amenities there to constantly activate the space, but its proximity to the plaza area, which I really like, I think lends itself as a good opportunity for some, I don't know if you call it shared space or some kind of space that has some community aspects. I think of Bell Flatirons has got a really nice community center. We've used that in the past for events, and it works well. And I think something like this could also work well. So I think the location of it's good. I think the uses, we could work on that a little further and achieve a lot of common goals. I'll say that I share Mark's comments about townhomes. Would probably be better activating Old Railway, the orientation, if that could be worked on a bit, but otherwise very positive about what you've brought forward. Others?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what everyone just said, but I'll probably do it anyways. Not intentionally. You know, I do appreciate you guys bringing all this at once. I mean, I think the challenge here has been trying to visualize all the different parcels and how they sort of connect together like a set of Legos. And, you know, ultimately, I think Kevin kind of did bring it up. I mean, as you start holding on to things that have already been decided, it does start to lose a narrative of what we envisioned years ago. So at least now we can look at this in totality. The question, though, is as you bring this forward in FDPs, is it going to be one giant FDP, or are you going to bring in parcels or smart, you know, like number 9, then number 11?
No, one
for all of them.
Yeah.
Because that's really good, because I think this discussion around the clubhouse has been very helpful for me. Because I'll be honest, when I read through everything last week, I thought the clubhouse was a shared space. I thought it fit into the narrative of how everything was going to work together. Because quite honestly, Promenade looks like I'm not sure who uses that to get to the restaurant. I almost feel like I'd rather get my car and drive around the corner, because it looks like a private street. You know, I'm walking through someone's neighborhood to get to the restaurant. And I know that wasn't the intent, but it's just kind of one of the things that manifests itself, and you see this all at once. And I want to kind of reverse myself from what I said before, because it looked like there's a lot of surface parking here, and I still think there is a lot of surface parking. But as you think about, you know, the farmers market day and shutting down Main Street, where in the world do all the cars go, and how do people get around? If, you know, imagine, you know, there's a sports something going on at the sports stable. There, you know, you can be parking here and you're walking across the street again, which is not bad. But you know, as we start putting parts of this together, the absence of the west parking garage puts tremendous pressure on the ability to even be successful in trying to make it pedestrian friendly, because you got to get here, and then where's your car? So I really do want us to think about that garage a little sooner rather than later, because the east garage on some days is in capacity. So when you add in the residents, and Kevin's right, I never even thought about it. When people move here, they will be bringing a lot of baggage. You know, maybe not over time, but early on they will. We're going to create some automatic tension between the folks that want to come to visit downtown and the folks that live here. I mean, just go look at downtown Louisville. That is a massive issue for Louisville right now, with the folks that live there and the folks that want to visit there, and the angst that's been created with parking. Even remarkably, the library parking garage, the retailers there don't like the garage because they think that the people are using the garage to park for the library and not for the restaurants. It's just bizarre.
There's too much parking.
Yeah, I know, I'm not kidding. It's, you know, so they're trying to experiment with time parking for the garage so that the retailers in downtown Louisville can actually benefit from it. So parking, I know we all want pedestrian friendly and pedestrian access, but it's the US. It's hard to give up our cars. It takes time. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, back to what I said, I really do like the concept of bringing it all together at once. I know it's going to make the FDP process time consuming, but I think it's beneficial. The real question though is, you know, post FDP, you know, how does a financing work for Ranch and Morgan in this case? You know, since all of it is, are you going to try to finance this all at once, or is it going to be pieces as you go forward with different builders?
Generally all at once.
Okay.
Yep.
like we talked about, the townhome section will actually be financed separately and done by one of our partner builders. So that's sort of it'll be approved as part of this document so that we have the whole thing approved and ready to go, but it'll be built by it and financed separately. The rest of it will be financed as a single project. And another important point on the RC Superior side is that we have started to do some underwriting with our bond underwriters for the tax increment financing for the project, associated with the cost sharing agreement and all of that. It does look like, from our current underwriting, if the bond markets stay the same and subject to a bunch of contingencies, that if all of the FTPs that we have planned to get approved this year, which is including this one, including the Toll Brothers FTP, and including the other Thrive FTPs in Planning Area 3, if those all get approved, and we close those sales this year, it looks like we'll be in a position early next year to raise a bond big enough to trigger that park obligation and that civic space obligation, including potentially the Marshall Road Bridge, including potentially the public parking structure. And so that begins to free up the financing for a lot of those public amenities that I think obviously are super important to the town and the project. But, like we talked about before, the private pieces getting approved and sold and under development first that has to happen before we can raise those bond dollars. And so, getting through this process this year, I think is going to be important. But if we do, it looks like we'll be able to actually build the parks and the bridge next year and start to see a lot of improvements there.
So finishing that thought, raising the money early next year, actually getting in and building it towards the end of the year?
Yeah, we'll be looking at raising it either the very end of this year or the first quarter of next year. And then we already have an approved FTP for the parks. I think there's probably a little bit of work to do on construction documents. We probably, wouldn't start for 6 months after kind of saying go, but yeah.
Since you brought up the parks, Park 1, I believe, also has an amphitheater in it. Now we're looking at an amphitheater here. In your mind, is there still value in having an amphitheater in Park 1?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's a little bit up to discussion with the OSTAC, ProStac, and Parks and Rec and how you want to use those different spaces. I like the idea of at least a small stage and sort of flexible space here to have live music. I think it draws a lot of activity and I think it's important for the Main Street here. I think potentially the amphitheater in Park 1 is a larger facility that could host maybe larger concerts, or I'm not sure what the town wants to see in that Park 1, but it certainly has more space than this does. This is probably, half to a third the size of that area in Park 1, so maybe they're used for kind of different types of events.
And you mentioned timing of still hoping to get this FTP in this year.
Oh, yeah.
And then the 3 remaining blocks early next year?
No, those really depend on what happens with the progress on deals. We won't be able to do anything here until we have an office tenant signed up and ready to go. If one comes next month, I'll come with an FTP in 4 months. If it takes them 2 or 3 years, then that's the answer too. So it's hard to, wish I had a better answer.
So when our residents ask for this Main Street that we're looking at right now, after it gets approved, how long until it's built and we can start using it? I saw 1.5 years, 2 years? Yeah,
our plan right now would be to submit, based on generally positive feedback, to submit an FTP by the end of May, which is roughly 2 months from now. Get through staff comments and all that process and get to an approval hearing by end of summer, fall this year, and then be able to start construction on this by the end of this year or beginning of 2020. It's going to be roughly a 2-year construction timeline to get the whole thing done. I think after the first 12 months, we can probably start to turn over the first retail spaces and potentially see some residents moving in and some retail spaces opening 12 to 18 months after we start construction. But then we'd be at 100%, C of O kind of 100% wrapped up within 2 years of starting. So you're looking at 100% complete by the beginning of 22. And again, hopefully delivering spaces starting in, beginning of 21 and 20.
Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize for being late. I first want to say I really appreciate seeing the whole thing put together like this. I think if I'd seen it in little bits and pieces, it wouldn't make any sense for me, so I really do appreciate that. Overall, nothing makes me absolutely crazy, but there's just a couple of things that I want to reinforce that were comments by other trustees. Promenade, feels wrong to me because it feels residential. It doesn't feel like what I thought the north-south road would be for us. So it just feels like it needs to be more oriented to the community. The clubhouse building, I'm totally on board with Mayor Paulson. That to me was the ideal place where our civic space would go. Now, maybe we can't do it there, but if you're gonna have all that town gathering area, it feels like we need to have ground space there where we can go in and have meetings or gatherings or whatever. I don't know what you're gonna do with it, but I really feel like the entrance being for a private community right there is wrong. It really needs to be oriented toward all the residents of not only downtown Superior, but the entire town of Superior. Even though I think the little pool there is kind of cool, one little pool in that whole big 1,400 houses that are Superior Town Center feels a little weird, like everybody else in the community is going to say, well, why don't we have a pool? So it's obviously your call if you leave it there, but it just felt a little odd that we just put one little pool in for, it's not a little pool obviously, but for one building when we haven't done that for the entire rest of downtown Superior. And then the final thing, I don't know why my mind somehow did not envision all this surface parking, but when I looked at it, I just went, whoa, 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 what's all this surface parking? But we also have to have places for people to park. So what even concerns me though is that this surface parking will never be available for people who come from Rock Creek and may need a place to park, because it's going to be taken up by residents who live in downtown Superior, because we've already got parking issues. So I guess I thought maybe there'd be more parking incorporated. I know in the townhouses, we certainly have parking incorporated, but I guess I thought that the parking garage would definitely be part of this plan, or there would be more structured parking incorporated in the buildings in some way, multi-level parking. The surface space parking seems like it's going to go really fast. The first time there's a you won't be able to get a parking space anywhere in downtown Superior. So those are my big issues. I really didn't envision the plaza being the way it is, and I like what I see. So I think it's exciting, and it could be the focal center that we're looking for. So great start. I think it could still need some tweaking, but it's exciting to actually see something now as opposed to blocks of space.
Sandy brought up an interesting point around us having a pool for these residents and not necessarily for others. I think it's a great point, and I would suggest if we're going to do that, I would love if we could put that type of a pool and clubhouse maybe up in that top north corner or somewhere where it's just not on display for everyone else, that here's this private space right in the middle of everything.
Well, it's a great sales and leasing tool, because if you want to use it, you're welcome to come live in that community.
Understood, understood.
I'll just say also that so many people in our community have been asking, when is Main Street going to get built? Like, when are we actually going to have downtown Superior? And you guys have spent a lot of time on this plan, and it's really a great plan. And I'm hopeful that we can get this thing just tweaked minorly, but that we move forward and are able to deliver on downtown as soon as humanly possible, because our community has been asking for downtown since 2012, 2013, and now it's 2019. And even if we approve this tomorrow, it's going to be several years before we can actually enjoy it. So I think it's really exciting, and I thank you guys for everything that you've done putting this together, because I think it's going to be a real gem just in terms of a downtown. I think it's going to bring the community together, and it'll be really successful.
Excellent.
I had a question about the green space. Is it, are you envisioning grass there or turf?
You're talking about the artificial central space in the plaza?
Yeah, an artificial turf.
We've gone back and forth on that. I'm not totally sure. You know, natural grass is nice because it stays cooler in the summer. It's tough because it dies, especially with dogs and all of that. Whereas artificial turf, especially a high quality one, can provide sort of all season use and potentially be more usable. We don't have an answer. We'll have an answer by the time we submit an FDP, and you know, we'll see where we land on that. Do you have any feelings on that? Anybody?
Real grass, not turf. Anytime I've ever seen turf inside a space like that, it just doesn't feel like a natural place people want to hang out.
I mean, I agree with it's a tough decision, right? Because the greatest thing ever is how Wildflower Park is really getting used, particularly the slack line, for example. But we've had to have that slack line off for 6 months, and okay, it was winter, but the turf, the grass just gets crushed underneath that. And if we want people there all the time, you're going to have the grass closed for weeks or months to let it reestablish itself. So I think, you know, I'll leave it to the urban planners. I know people have, you know, done different things. I think some combination of maybe, you know, very pedestrian friendly stamped concrete type of thing with some natural grass and some turf, fake turf areas, and then its highest quality might be the right. But I agree, it's a tough decision for you guys, and when you bring it forth, I'll definitely want to see examples of this community did grass and then pulled it out because of this, for this reason, you know. But I'll leave it to you guys, but I don't know the answer to that. So
I will say artificial turf, I'll speak as an architect for the landscape. But artificial turf has come a long way in the last few years, where you have to be right, you have to actually pull out to understand, is this grass or is this not grass?
Right.
It's that effective now.
Does it still have the challenges in the summertime where it gets about 10, 15, 20 degrees hotter than everything around it?
It does, but we've also incorporated some irrigation systems into it so that you could, at a much less water level of use, right? Because that's always the challenge of grass as well. But at a much less water usage level, kind of cool it down when you know you're going to have those, you know, 100-degree days at, you know, 2 in the afternoon. So there are some management strategies to address that. And we've done it both ways. I mean, like in Solaris in the town, in that big oval there, that they put big turf in there during the summer, and they do all kinds of events out there, from kicking the soccer ball to fly fishing, casting. The town greens we've done at Stapleton have all been natural grass. So I think we'll just continue to study that. But as Terry said, some of the synthetic turfs have come a long way. So obviously we want to get more input from your folks as well.
My personal preference would be artificial. I think it's, you just don't want the downtime that's going to be associated with the mowing, the fertilizing, and the fiddling, and the replanting, and all of that. You want the space used as much as possible and looking good as much as possible. I think we've just got such a short green season here, 3 months maybe, and then things go dormant. So I just think a space like this, you want active and nice as many days as possible. But again, I'll leave it to the experts to bring us the latest examples and reasons we should choose whatever we choose, and appreciate your expertise on that. And I'll echo what Mark says. I mean, we've been looking for this for a long time, and to see it all as a cohesive plan, I really appreciate the effort that's gone into this. I know it's been a challenge to get to this point, and we appreciate all the work that was taken to get here. And I know our new residents of downtown are excited, especially to see this, because this is why they moved here. And many of them are here tonight, and so I know they're excited to see this point, and very much, I think, are looking forward to it. And so we want to be sure to hear from all of you, either tonight, over emails, over the next weeks and months. Please do let us know what all residents of Superior, but especially want to hear from those that are going to be looking at this every day. Closing thoughts from others?
I'd say go with the artificial turf. I mean, ordinarily, I'll defer to the organic option if possible, but I agree, you know, we want to activate the space for 12 months, and if 9 months of that it's dead, dormant, and needing to reestablish, it's not going to serve the purpose that we want it to serve. We want people to be throwing a frisbee out there, laying a blanket down when it's nice, and just having fun. So I think, provided that we have, you know, really high quality artificial turf, yes, I echo Kevin's point. Let's see the samples during the FDP, but you know, right now I think the artificial turf is the way to go.
I agree. I'd prefer the artificial turf for all the reasons already mentioned, and also if we really want people to use it quite a bit, that's going to be a lot of people trampling the grass, and then that gets gross even in the summer. So
Dogs.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm thrilled. I mean, generally, you know, we've been waiting, you know, for something really cool to be shown, and if you guys pull off, you know, these images and these character sketches and the scale that you all are proposing, I think, particularly on Main and around the plaza, I think it's a great plan. I think it needs a few tweaks, but this is really exciting. Thank you for all your efforts to get it to this point.
Thanks. I just like the VR. Is it cool?
It's fun. I liked it.
Should we bring that to every meeting?
Yes.
That's going to be a new requirement,
Yes,
I don't know how you enter it into the record, but.
Just need a headset for all of us so we can all have.
Yeah, we got to buy some more headsets.
We started bringing the flyovers, right? So that upped the game in terms of.
Right. I know. Every time we show something new, it becomes a requirement for the next one. That's all good. Well, thank you all for your time and your comments. We'll work on tweaks that we've heard here. We have a design meeting tomorrow, so we'll get right on that. And then we will, I think, plan to have an FDP in as soon as we can and get this thing moving, get these sales closed, and get those bonds raised and be off to the races. So it's an exciting time for downtown Superior as a whole, and it's great to see this kind of momentum after, you know, being here for a few years. So thank you. And again, to the public, you know, would love to hear from you, either in public forum or via emails or other comments. We'd love to incorporate your thoughts too. So thanks for coming.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you. We'll be back at 7 o'clock. Final office.